Hi everyone, Diana Rankin here with your weekly psychic soul messages and perhaps a prediction or two. We'll see. It's the 18th week of January and it's April the 28th to May the 4th week. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. I so appreciate your coming and telling your friends about this channel. I so appreciate your comments below and we can get dialogues going sometimes. So what we're going to do on today's video is we will get a message from Philip, my spirit guide, and as we know, each page is a different wisdom, so we will get that in a moment. And then I've been, since the end of last year, I've been picking out from one of my other books, picking out a way to make our lives a bit more joyful, a little bit happier. And this week I just turned to week 41, which is we'll talk about in a few minutes. But first I want to talk to you about communication, because the communication that we have in our personal lives has a huge effect on the communication that's taking place in our country, the US, and in the world. And you know, what's happening up here is just a reflection of what's happening within each of us. And so as we heal our lives, it helps to, it reflects out in the world. And so we may say, yeah, but I didn't want what that administration is doing. It doesn't mean that you wanted that specifically, but any anger that we have, even toward that administration, that anger is just going out into the world, and it's like a rolling stone. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because it picks up the anger energy. And so we want to heal our lives first. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about communication, because I think communication is beneath an awful lot of our fears and our angers. And there's a lot of miscommunication out there. And the only way we're going to stop a lot of the miscommunication is we have to certainly understand what our communication is, and then we have to try to be better about hearing one another and communicating with one another. You know, studies tell us if you and I have a conversation and we really, really work at listening to that, listening to one another in that conversation, we're going to be able to hear comprehend about 85% of what the other person is saying. And that's at the high end of the scale, which means most of the time we're only going to get about 50 to 60% of what the other person is saying. Why? Well, for one thing, we're so busy trying to defend our position that we're not able to hear the other person. And that's with relationships, and it also plays out in the larger world. The other thing is certainly our words mean different things to different people. We don't have that much objectivity, that's objective truth. Most of our truths are subjective. Let me illustrate that for you. This is my tea mug. I call it a mug. Someone else might call it a cup, someone else a vessel, someone else, if you plant flowers in it, you might call it a urn or a vase. Now a urn I think would be bigger, but it's kind of shaped like a small urn. Okay, so whether it's an urn or a vase or a mug or a cup, that is subjective. And that subjectivity comes from everything that we've learned our whole life, plus the collective consciousness in our world. Now, let's take this, for example. If I taste this, I may not like it because it may be well watered and I grew up with city, or I grew up with city water, or I grew up with the opposite. So my subjectivity will tell me the taste, and the vessel might be different, but objectively I know this is H2O. So there are very few objective truths. What color do you see this as? Is it blue? Is it gray? Is it green? Is it a mixture? How we see this color, how we see this object, what we believe this object to be, what we believe about this object, is subjective. Objective truth is this is H2O. On that, I'm going to ask you, just take my word for it. I'm telling you, this is water. And normally I would say, don't take anybody's word for anything. Check it out yourself. But for the sake of explanation, this is H2O. That's an objective truth. But the container that the H2O is in is subjective truth. Is it a glass? Is it a tumbler? It's going to depend upon our subjectivity. Last week I talked to you, I gave you a little story about Jack and Jill going up the hill. I want to change that, elaborate that story a bit to further elaborate the communication issue and why it's so important with us who are able to reach out and communicate with someone who may think a little differently than I do. I want to also remind us that the ancient ones told us that all the truths would come out at this period of time. Now, whoever thought those truths were going to be what we're learning? You know, I had no idea that the white nationalist party, or whatever you want to call it, group, I had no idea it was so strong here in the U.S. None. Until 2016. Now I can speak out against it. Not with anger, not with fighting fire with fire, because that may only create a bigger fire. Or as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye only makes the whole world blind. So I really believe we have to be able to have those healthy boundaries. We have to be able to speak out. But we have to be able to find, as I said last week, that common ground. You know, without this current administration, how many know the word gerrymander? We've learned about the gerrymandering that is going on in many different states, including the one I live in, and it's been going on for years, but we get so busy with our own lives that unless it touches our lives personally, we don't necessarily know what's going on until we are forced to pay attention. I always say God whispers, and if we don't heed the whisper, we get the shout. And if we don't heed the shout, we get the big bang. We are in a time of shout. Let's heed it before the big bang comes. Will there be an impeachment? It doesn't look like it at this point, at least not before 2020. Is there a chance that the same president will be president after 2020? There is that opportunity there, that chance that will happen. The opportunity is also there for us to change that, to change the government back for an inclusivity of everyone, not exclusivity. How do we do that? Well, let's talk about Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill lived in a village, and that village was led by a king, and that king said, I want everybody to pay attention to me. And some people aren't, so I'm going to dry up the water source, and those people who don't listen to me, they're not going to get any water, and they're just going to go off and die. Well, Jill kind of looked at that, and Jill said, you know, that's not right. I'm going to do something about that. And she had a choice. She could go yell at the king, or she could go on social network and say, oh, what an ugly person he is, or he eats hamburgers and he's fat. Or she could say, I'm going to take action in love. And Jack happened to be there when she decided. Jack, she said to him, I'm going to go find water, and I'm going to help these people in need of water. Jack said, well, don't you think the king's right? And she said, I can't watch people die of thirst. He thought about that. He thought, oh, okay, Jill, I'm going to go help you. I think the king's right that I'm going to help you. So they went out into the woods and along the path, and Jill came to a spot and she said, you know, I think there's water up there. I'm going to go get it. I'm going to take my pail up that hill and get the water. And Jack said, no, Jill, the water's down the hill. I really believe the water's down the hill. Well, we have this act of love that Jill, first of all, said, I'm going to go help the people who need water. And Jack, although reluctant, did agree to help. Another act of love. So here we are at another impasse, with Jill saying, I'm going up the hill because the water's there, and Jack saying, I'm going down the hill because that's where the water is. And guess what? They separate. And how they separate can either be an act of love by one of them saying to the other and the other agreeing, you search that way, I'll search this way. That way we can cover more territory and hopefully we're both right. Or an act of non-love by saying, go ahead, go where you want, I don't care. You're wrong. Well, Jack and Jill went their opposite directions. And Jill came running down the hill with her pail of water, and Jack came running up the hill with her pail of water. Another moment where we can either act in love or act in fear or anger. And Jack could be angry. You found water up there. How dare you? I've got better water. Jill said, or we can act in love, and Jack and Jill can come together and say, look, we both found water. Let's take it back to the villagers. When I say, my friends, that we must stand up for love, this is what I'm talking about. We have to we don't have to agree on everything. Remember, Jack thinks the king is right, but he also agrees we don't want people to go without water. So we found that common ground. We had many times in there where we had to reach out in love to find that common ground. We could have argued where the water is, but we decided to come together for the common good. They get back to the village, and Jack sees how the people respond to him. He sees how Jill responded to him. And he starts to think, maybe the king is wrong. I'm going to continue to help Jill. Now think about this. If we are constantly at our dinner tables with our families over the holidays, over Passover or Easter or any time we get together, if we are constantly arguing with our friends or we're constantly telling everyone, you're wrong, we don't hear it when somebody says to us, you're wrong. So instead of saying you're wrong, instead of really turning that anger and that fear at the other, allow that to be healed in our own lives. And then as we reach out in love, we can create more and more acts of love. And what changes the king's mind in this village is he sees the people suddenly strong together. And they say, you're wrong, king. You're wrong. And we aren't going to put up with your being wrong any longer. But it starts here, not up here. And it only starts if we're willing to give up our anger and recognize what's wrong. There's no water in the village. Let's go get it. I hope that was clear. Let's see what Philip has to say for our message this week. Think left page or right page, and then we just flip through, and that's where my finger's stopping, or my thumb. And I hear right, but I always let you know what the left page is, or the opposite page, but I'm hearing right. So if you heard right, your intuition is strong today. And the right page says, find peace and war will be meaningless. Imagine that. That's exactly what we've been talking about. Find peace and war will be meaningless. You know, my friends, if we are always at war, we're never going to feel that peace in our hearts. And if we don't have that peace in our hearts, the greater world is just reflecting what we're putting out there. So if enough of us put out love, acts of love, and act in loving manners, if enough of us stand up for love, we will shift the world. Right now, we need some more of us to stand up for love. Remember, find peace and war will be meaningless. On the other side, it says, the bud of the flower will not grow where only weeds are planted. The bud of the flower will not grow where only weeds are planted. Well, no. Isn't that the truth? Stop planting weeds. Plant flowers. Our joy process this week is doing the right thing. What does that mean? If we don't live in our own integrity, and it goes along with what we've been talking about, if we don't live in our own integrity, if we don't do the right thing in our lives, how can we expect the rest of the world to do the right thing? The rest of the world is just reflecting what we're putting out there. Remember, I didn't know the white nationalists, as they call themselves. I didn't know there was so much prejudice in the world until the last few years. I have to stay now in my integrity and do the right thing. I have to look within me to find any prejudice I have against another in my life so I can walk my talk, so I can help heal the greater world and create a pathway for others to follow. So my friend, right now, in this very moment, simply commit to being the best you that you can. Simply commit to saying, I stand in love. Commit to weeding out your prejudice, your bias, your emotions. Stand in love. This is the work we're doing. Remember, the outer world is just reflecting our inner world. And we can do this. We can create a much more beautiful world, a much kinder world. Not by yelling about what's wrong, but by changing it. You know, back in the 60s, we had some great songs. And one of them came to mind the other day, and I couldn't remember who sang it, and I had some help looking it up. And it was 1967. And I just want to read you a couple of the lines from it. It's called Get It Together, and the Young Bloods sang it. Love is but a song to sing, fear's the way we die. You can make the mountains ring or make the angels cry. And then the verse which you'll recognize. Come on, people now, and you don't want me singing this, by the way. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Remember, love is but a song to sing. Fear's the way we die. You can make the mountains ring or make the angels cry. It's an individual choice. Choose the choice of love. Simply move the body when you feel that anger or that fear rising. Don't give in to it. Listen, really listen to the other person. Because chances are what the other person is saying is, I'm really scared. I'm wounded. Only they can't say those words. I'm not saying you're going to change everyone's mind. You're not. But I am saying there are many people who are just looking for a reason to change political parties, to vote in 2020 for the honest person, or at least the one who's going to be the person who will lead this country the way it needs to be led, through goodness, strength, and kindness, and will once again stand with the world for all humanity. It starts with each of us. Acts of love. I love you, my friends. Thank you for being with us today. Daisy says hello. She had her annual checkup and she's doing well. So thank you for being with us. I love you. Thank you for loving us. And thank you for accepting our love. Until the next time.